So you stretch your hamstrings because they perpetually feel tight, but after you've stretched them, they never seem to sustain this new level of flexibility. Today I'm going to share 3 reasons why I think that might be happening. Welcome back, I'm Adam Cox, and today we're looking at 3 reasons why your hamstrings won't sustain the stretch and flexibility that you put on them when you're trying to increase that flexibility by stretching and mobilizing the legs. Before that though, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button to receive future videos and more content like this. Let's get into it. So reason number 1 that the hamstrings won't maintain this new level of flexibility that you're working on is weak hip flexors. It's important to understand that muscles don't work in isolation. One muscle doesn't do something in total isolation to another muscle. It works as groups and pairs, and one of those terms that we use for that is the word antagonist. So we have an agonist, which is the working muscle, and in this case we can say the hamstring is the agonist that we're looking at, but the antagonist is the hip flexor. Unless those 2 muscles are balanced, and then this is just simplifying this, there are obviously other things going on, but the hip flexor must be balanced relatively to the hamstring, because the hip flexor's job, located on the front of the hip here, is designed to pull the pelvis forwards, and the hamstring, because of where it attaches onto the pelvis here, pulls the pelvis backwards. So if the hip flexor is weak, the hamstring effectively has carte blanche to just pull the pelvis backwards, and it will keep doing that if the weakness is maintained in the hip flexor. So the exercise you can see me doing here, which is the prone jackknife, is an excellent exercise to help improve not only the strength but actually more the coordination through the hips. So maintaining a neutral spine, as you can see here, which is maintaining the spinal position, not allowing it to increase or decrease. You are maintaining the coordination through the hip flexor, teaching the nervous system how to use that hip flexor muscle correctly, and then ultimately improving that agonist-antagonist relationship with the hamstring. Reason number 2 for perpetually tight hamstrings is a weak and unstable core. What do I mean by that? Well, I crudely explain this to my clients by using the analogy of a tent and saying that the hamstrings are similar to the guy lines on a tent coming from a tent pole. So if the tent pole in this case is the pelvis and the hamstrings are attaching to the pelvis, if the core is weak and therefore the pelvis is not stabilized, the hamstrings step in to try and do that stabilizing role, i.e. the guy lines being tighter and trying to hold that tent pole up. So we can strengthen the core muscles to help alleviate some of that tension in the hamstring, because the hamstring shouldn't be doing this job necessarily. So exercises that we want to work on, our muscles that we want to work on, are particularly the transverse abdominis. So you can see me here doing the tummy vacuum exercise, which is an excellent exercise to strengthen that. You can also now see me doing the lower abdominal series of exercises, and that is really important to maintain core coordination. Again, the term I've used there, so using the lower abdominals and the hip flexors interchangeably to make sure that we have stability. And then also the horse stance exercise, which is a really important series of exercises to maintain spinal and core stability. So those 3 exercises will help if you're trying to also stretch and maintain and sustain a level of hamstring flexibility that is normal and adequate. So the 3rd reason why we see it's difficult to maintain hamstring flexibility is you're stretching the wrong end of the hamstring. So a lot of people will sit for their day job, so you've got, in a sitting position, shortening of this end of the hamstring for hours at a time, and a lengthening effect of this end of the hamstring. So just to be clear, the hamstring obviously attaches just across the knee and up across the hip here, so it's a long muscle and it has a couple of ends. So what you usually find is that people will spend all day at a desk or sitting in this position, and then before exercise or before running or what have you, they will then go and perform a stretch, as you can see me doing here. And this basically is stretching the other end, so the end that is the position that's been lengthened all day. So you're compounding that imbalance. What that means is that the poor old hamstring is really imbalanced within itself. One end is maintaining that tightness, the knee end, as I just said, and the hip end is getting longer and longer and longer, and it's not going to stand for that. So one of the ways that the body will deal with that is just shortening and tightening that progressively to maintain some sort of stability, whether that's stability in the knee or in the hip or of the core, as we've already talked about. So the stretch that you can see me doing here, which is the single leg Swiss ball hamstring stretch, is, in my opinion, one of the best stretches that you could do to stretch the knee end of the hamstring, which is going to alleviate a lot of that tension that you put into the hamstring from sitting with the knee in a shortened position for hours at a time. Thanks for watching. I really hope that was interesting, and please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button for future videos like this.